Welcome to the Shamrock Green Room, your favorite podcast highlighting everything about Scotus Central Catholic and Columbus Catholic schools. Each episode, we discuss what it's like to be a Shamrock. Whether that's a current student, a teacher, an alum, or supporter, we want to hear your stories on why this is such a special place in education. I'm your host, Taylor Dahl, Communications Director for Columbus Catholic Schools, and today I'm joined by former history teacher, football and track coach, and athletic director, Gary Puetz. Coach Puetz has taught and coached at Scotus for 41 years. Gary, it's great to see you. Thanks for taking the time out of your summer schedule to come in and chat with us.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. I'm kind of looking forward to it.
We're sitting in your old office, is that right?
Yes, this was my office when I was the activities director. The old athletic director's office was down by the main office, and I wanted to move down here because this is where all the action was. Plus, I was teaching. Still was running the weight room, so it was just a lot more convenient.
Let's just kind of get started. I know, you are very synonymous here with Scotus, but maybe a lot of people don't know your whole story. For the people who may not know, before you got to Scotus, let's just hear about where you grew up and where you graduated high school, and let's just talk about the early years of Gary Puetz.
Okay, I was born and raised in David City, went to Aquinas High School. In fact, my class was the freshman the first year that Aquinas opened, so we were the first class to go all 4 years at Aquinas. I had two older brothers. Of course, Jim taught and coached here at Scotus for a long time, and a brother Bill, and have a younger sister, lives up in Iowa right now. So when I ended up coming to Scotus, obviously, again, there was a lot of grief that I caught from my friends at Aquinas, being the rivals that we've been over the years, but it's worked out great.
Yeah. What was Aquinas and St. Mary's set up like?
St. Mary's was in David City, and then there was Dwight Assumption, there was Marietta. They were Catholic high schools that were in Butler County, and in the fall of, it had been the fall of 1961, the new building was built, and all of these schools consolidated. So it was kind of a unique situation. My freshman class had 107 kids in it, so we had a lot of kids in school. When I was a senior, I think we graduated in 97, and we were the smallest class in school. So
wow.
And David City High was just as big, so there were just a lot more kids out in the agricultural areas than there are today.
So you would have kids who came freshman year from, like you said, Dwight Assumption or Marietta that you had not met before.
That's right. Shelby, Ulysses. We even had a couple of kids like from B that's in Seward County.
Wow.
Brainerd, all of Butler County. Abby and Bruno, east of David City. So. No, my class at St. Mary's my 8th grade class at St. Mary's probably had, 25, 30 kids in it. And then the rest of them came from all over the county, and even from Seward County and Polk County. So it was a unique experience.
For sure, yeah. You kind of go from having maybe 25 kids in your class to the next year having 90 or 100. That's a big jump. That had to have been a little bit of a transition.
Oh, sure it was, but...
and you were in a different building.
Oh, yeah.
Right, yeah.
St. Mary's was downtown by the church. Aquinas, of course, is south of David City on the highway there.
So where Aquinas is now, the Aquinas High School, that's where it's always been?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they had really forward thinking to put it there back at that time.
Oh, yeah.
So that's great. What was it like growing up in David City? What did you do for fun as a kid?
Oh, I can't tell you everything, but play sports. We played a lot of baseball. We all had. I lived on a farm just a half a mile west of David City, so I was basically a town kid, and we had kind of neighborhood football teams and stuff like that. Just kind of the normal things.
Sure. So when you were a kid, if you wanted to watch high school football, who was your team? Was it St. Mary's?
St. Mary's, yes. My brothers were 6 years older and 7 years older than me. So that's where I got my first taste of high school football, going to their games. And then they both ended up going to Wayne State. So when I was in the 7th and 8th grade, I was playing junior high at David City. The grade school was still called St. Mary's. And watched my brothers play football.
Just because I'm a nerd when it comes to this stuff, was St. Mary's? What was the mascot? What was the colors?
St. Mary's is blue and gold, and they were the Knights.
Okay, and then played 11-man football, 6-man football.
No, 11-man foot. Well, they started off. St. Mary's was also a new school, like in the mid '50s, so they started off playing like 8-man football and then 11-man football. By the time they closed up and had some great teams, we had a coach that would go on to become the coach at Aquinas, Mr. Pillen, and he won like 3 or 4 state championships at St. Mary's and had some great players that went on and played at Nebraska and all over the place.
So who were some of the teams that they would play in 11-man? Was it still kind of the same?
Kind of the same thing.
Newman,
We
Scotus?
would play St. Bonds at the time.
Yep.
Newman wasn't open yet, but West Point Guardian Angel, it was called. They would play even an Omaha team once in a while, Omaha Holy Name, Omaha Cathedral, Seward. So pretty kind of the same schedule that Aquinas probably has now.
Was there a specific moment or a coach who made you realize that you wanted to be a teacher and a coach when you were in high school?
Oh, I'm sure Mr. Pillen was that individual. And then my oldest brother, Jim, went into became a teacher and a coach, and so that was probably Mr. Pillen, and then probably Jim example sent me that way.
How was your football teams when you were at Aquinas? Were you guys pretty solid?
We were pretty good. When I was a sophomore, I think we were undefeated with 1 tie. When I was a junior, we were 7-2. St. Bonds came to David City, and we beat them at home. The next year, we were undefeated, number 1 in the state, and we came here to Columbus, and they beat us 6-0. So, no, they were very successful.
Yeah. What did your parents do?
They were farmers. Like I said, we lived about a half a mile west of David City, and my dad was a farmer all of his life.
What were the next steps after Aquinas? You said Wayne State.
I went to Wayne State. I was recruited to go there. My first year there as a freshman, I injured my shoulder toward the end of my senior year in football, so I sat out or redshirted or whatever it was. It called a redshirt in the old days, but just sat out my freshman year, and then I played football and graduated in the in the spring of 1970.
Tell us some stories about college.
Again, I have to be careful here. Several of my classmates from Aquinas went there. It was probably about half the population of the student population at Wayne State was from Iowa. So I made a lot of good friends over in Iowa, and to this day they're still my good friends. Our coach recruited Chicago, and I made a lot of good friends from Chicago that I still have that are friends of mine today, and it was kind of a neat experience.
For sure. That's great. Did you meet your wife Judy at Wayne State?
No. We graduated together but never dated until about, it was the summer of 1974. 9 years after we graduated, we were at a party together, and one thing led to another, and we got married in 75, 10 years after we graduated. I can remember at our 10-year class reunion, a lot of my friends, again, giving me a hard time that you have to you had to wait 10 years before anybody would date you, you know. So
That's good. That's good. So you graduate from Wayne State. What were the steps for job hunting?
Okay, at that time there was a excess of people coming out of school going into teaching, and I had my heart set on I didn't want to go to some little bitty town out in the middle of the sandhills. I interviewed several places, didn't get offered a job that I got offered jobs, but nothing that I wanted. So my brother Bill at that time was living in Omaha. In August of 1971, I moved in with Bill, and I actually worked for International Harvester, and got transferred from Omaha, which I really liked living in Omaha. I got sent to Fargo, North Dakota, and then Grand Forks, North Dakota in the next year. So that's where I started. Pat Burns, who eventually became he was from David City, and eventually became the coach at UNO, football coach at UNO. Graduated from college and got a job at a little town in northeast Nebraska called Newcastle. Well, during the summer, Pat got drafted. He's got his draft notice sent. So Newcastle school board pulled back the job offer. Pat called me up, so I call up the superintendent in Newcastle. I drive down on a Sunday night from Grand Forks, North Dakota, and they offered me the job on the spot, and I accepted it. So that's how I got into teaching.
Wow. So you leave International Harvester, you leave North Dakota, and you come back to Newcastle. Had you ever, being at Wayne, had you ever gone to Newcastle?
No.
I didn't think so.
I had.
It's semi-close, but it's not like a destination for
there was
going up that way.
a couple of guys from Newcastle that were on the Wayne State football team, but I had never been there.
What were your first impressions?
Well, what should I say? It was a job 2 years earlier I would have turned down, But by that time I had decided I don't think I'm a businessman. I think I want to get back into coaching, be involved with football, and so on. So it turned out to be really a good place.
Yeah, for sure. So what classes did you teach?
I was a history major and also driver's ed. So that's what I taught at Newcastle, and then my first several years here at Scotus. That's what I taught. And I was also a PE. I was a double major, PE and history. And at Newcastle, I might have had one or two PE classes. By the time I came to Scotus, I was half-time PE, half-time history.
What are some of your favorite memories coaching football at Newcastle? Who was on your schedule? Would that have been
that was
Ponca?
Like Ponca, Hardington, Wynot, Allen, Winnebago, Wald Hill. They were in the Lewis and Clark Conference, and it was a good competitive conference. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Now you look up that way, and Ponca's still playing 11-man.
Yeah,
they're pretty consistent. They're oddly like they've pretty much been one of the Class C schools that have stayed the same size for about the last 50 years. They've pretty much always been in that C2 spot. Everybody else is playing 8-man football with Wynot, and they're all pretty solid.
Yeah,
Wynot's really good. Did you guys have some pretty solid teams?
Yeah, we were played in the conference championship one year at. We played at Wayne State at the stadium there. That's where the Lewis and Clark Conference played their conference championship. So
wow, that's neat.
We were the 3 years I was there. I think we were like 6-3, 7-2, and like 8-2, something like that. And the last 2 years we were ranked in the top 10.
And then you also met a future Scotus coach.
Yeah.
at Newcastle. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I can. Met John Peterson at our first faculty meeting, and ironically, he came there, and I think he might have been the junior high girls basketball coaches. I mean, he had nothing to do with any at the varsity level, and of course, we became very good friends. And the first thing that I got him to do, I was the head track coach, and had like one assistant, and I wanted another one, so I talked Pete into helping me. And he took over the jumps, the long jump, triple jump, and he didn't know the triple jump from jumping off a roof, you know. So, but he figured it out, and we ended up having a kid all 3 years that John helped me on the track team there. We always had a triple jumper, and one of them placed at the state 2 years in a row. So
Wow.
Even though Coach Peterson was not did not have a track background or anything, I guess you could tell already at that time that he had what it takes to be a successful coach.
Yeah, to be a motivator, to
Yep.
squeeze something out of,
Yep.
out of something where he may not be totally comfortable in, but hey, I'm going to learn it, and we're going to do the best that I can with it.
Exactly.
So you're at Newcastle for 3 years, and then what kind of transpires here for Jim to call you to say, well, hey, why don't you come down here? We've got an opening.
Yeah, well, it happened rather quickly. I had already signed my contract for 75, 76 at Newcastle. At the state track meet, talking to Jim and the athletic director, Vern Younger, and they had a guy that just left that had been an assistant football coach, assistant track coach, and taught history. So I called, the principal was Ed Hittner at the time, and the Sunday after the state track meet, I came down here and I interviewed, and they hired me. And then it was kind of tough going back to Newcastle, telling them I've taken a different job. They understood, though. The administrators at Newcastle understood that a little bit bigger school and, quite a bit bigger school, bigger town, that's kind of what I wanted. So that's how that happened. Again, kind of like the Newcastle job, it kind of happened over a weekend. The Scotus interview and opening and everything kind of happened over a weekend.
Well, that's nice. Newcastle was pretty, understanding
Yes,
and
they were.
respectful of your decision, so that's great. So then you take the job, and then you start to come down here. When word gets out that not only from Aquinas that Jim's here, now you're coming. Like, was there some heat from Aquinas people, or was it all pretty understanding, or was it just kind of friendly ribbing?
It was friendly ribbing. Like I said, I caught some grief. Again, that in the summer of '75, when I took this job at Scotus, that was our 10-year class reunion. Plus, me and Judy were going to get married in July, and I think we had our class reunion like in June. So naturally, I was the brunt of a lot of jokes from my friends. But as it turned out, we had a great relationship over the years with Aquinas, and hopefully they say the same thing. Right now, their coach Ron Mimick is a Scotus guy.
Yep. So it kind of goes both ways. If they were upset for, if some people were upset that you guys came here, it's like, well, you guys got Ron, and it worked out okay too.
That's exactly right.
So. It's all good. Yeah, I love working with those guys. It's always been positive. So what's your first memory as a Scotus teacher in the fall of '75? Do you have any? I mean, you kind of talked about some memories that summer, but what is your first memory as a Scotus teacher in the fall of '75?
Well, I think the first thing was just the fact that I was at Scotus. Being an Aquinas alumni, this happened so quickly, and it was going to be, how should I say? We probably had 50 kids out for football. 10 through 12, where Newcastle probably had 20. So that was a big change, and just the fact that it's a little bit bigger town and so on.
Sure. So do you remember what your class load was like? Because obviously coming from Newcastle, it's a little bit smaller, but then you come here, maybe you have a little bit more time.
We had in junior high I taught junior high and senior high. We had 4 sections in junior high, and I taught Nebraska history to those 4 sections. I also taught a couple of sections of American history to high school kids, and then I had like maybe 7th and 8th grade PE, and or maybe 8th and 9th grade PE. I forget which one it was, but a couple of PE classes, and I had 8 class periods, 8 classes. I think we had 9-period day.
Oh wow. Can you recall some stories of your first football practices at Scotus, and how was that? Was it different than Newcastle, or?
Well, sure, it was different. First of all, at Newcastle, we had a football practice field right out the back door. At Scotus, we had to walk all the way down to it'd be 12th Avenue and about 10th Street. That was our. So the kids had to walk all the way from Scotus to the practice field over by the cemeteries is where our practice field was. So that was different. Just the fact that there were a lot more kids, and we had a couple of good players at Newcastle, but my first year here at Scotus in '75, we were preseason Class B picked to win the state championship, preseason number 1. So a little bit more pressure that way.
For sure. In that first year, the Shamrocks went 7-2.
Yeah.
Just missing out on the playoffs. Some of the captains on the team were Dan Martin, John Fisher, and then was it Dan Shaker? Shecker.
Yeah.
What do you remember from that first year?
Well, we lost our last 2 games. We got beat. Aquinas, ironically, beat us in David City, which we were number 1 in the state. We were 7-0, number 1 in the state. And then the last game of the year, we got beat up at West Point. So that was kind of disappointing.
Yeah, and now the playoffs are back to that 16 team. So
that was the first year of the playoffs too, I think, or first or second year of the playoffs.
I believe it was 75 because my dad graduated from Scribner High in '74. And they went 11-0, but they didn't have playoffs then. But they were deemed Class C state champs.
Yeah.
Now playoffs. If you're 7-2, you're going to get in. But
you almost had to be undefeated.
Yeah.
To get in at that time.
There were no points. Was it just selection based on?
No, it was. You were in districts.
Okay.
And you almost had to be undefeated in your district to win.
Do you remember how many teams made it at that time? Was it 8? Or was it 16?
I think it could have been 16.
Okay.
I can't remember for sure.
Just doing some research and looking at
it could have been just 8. I don't know.
Yeah, kind of looking at just some of your guys' records with it. Most of them are 7-win seasons, and sometimes you make the playoffs and sometimes you don't. So It just had been a little disappointing sometimes where you just barely miss out. So would you consider Lakeview the biggest rival when you arrived, or was it more so Aquinas on the boys' side?
Well, Lakeview was a big rival. However, Scotus had pretty much had their way with Lakeview at the time, so it was a big-time game, no doubt about it. But I would say maybe Aquinas or, Schuyler was always – we always played Schuyler, and they were very, very good. They won a state championship there in the 76, 77, somewhere in there. So they were a big-time rival too, So it wasn't just one. There were several.
Yeah. Some of your late 70s teams, like I mentioned earlier, finished 7-2, just missed out on the playoffs. In 77, you guys finished 7-2 with wins over West Point, Central Catholic, Albion, Holy Name, Boys Town, Aquinas, and GICC. Only losses were oddly both scores of 14-8 to Schuyler and Newman. Do you remember anything from that 77 year?
Well, I think maybe that might have been a year Schuyler might have won the state championship that year. And if I remember correctly, when we got beat by Wahoo Newman, the lights went out, and we had to stop the game for about half hour or so until they got the doggone lights on, and then they could only get one bank on, so that was kind of unusual. I don't think we were too happy about it, but I kind of think that was the year that happened.
So you get here for a few years, and then you hear Scotus is going to start looking for a new volleyball coach. Did you immediately run to the athletic director to vouch for John, or were you just how did that work to get John here?
Well, Pete went from Newcastle up to Iowa, Little Rock, Iowa, I believe is what town he was at, and we stayed in communication. And yes, when I heard that we were going to need a volleyball coach, I called John right away. I also talked to Father Bushman, and he was the superintendent, and Ed Hittner. By that time, I think Frank Spanseri was the athletic director, and got Pete down here for an interview. And again, it was one of these things where him and Marilyn came down here maybe Friday night, stayed at our place. He interviewed Saturday morning, and Saturday afternoon got a phone call at our house, and they hired him, that quick. And as you can say, the rest is history.
For sure. How excited was it for you to have John back in the building and for you to kind of introduce him to people who he hadn't met?
It was very exciting. John became a very close friend of mine at Newcastle, so it was good to get him here in Columbus.
What are some fun stories from the classroom or bus rides and football games or track, kind of from those first years in the 70s that you remember?
Well, I can remember, a lot of things. Probably one of the funniest things was our student managers that we had. They were real guys with personalities, and they kept things alive and hopping. A guy by the name of John Kopetsky was our head manager from like the 7th grade all the way through his senior year. He was pretty instrumental in keeping everybody loose, and the bus rides sometimes. Luckily, the vast majority of them were happy coming home. But even coming from David City to Columbus after you get beat, it seems like it's an hour and a half on the bus, So,
yeah.
So there were just so many good things. We had just a whole lot of good kids, and I have to say that 99.9% of our parents were always very, very supportive. We understood that it was a sacrifice for them to send their kids to Scotus, and we wanted to give them the best service that we could, best opportunities that we could. And
you talk about that. That's such a big part, and there's a lot of reasons why Scotus is successful, but I feel like a huge part that doesn't get talked about enough is parental involvement.
Oh, absolutely.
I guess kind of just briefly touch on how important that is to not just like football program success or track program success, but just overall just success in keeping this place a great place for education.
Just too much to probably even to talk about that the parents volunteer to help the school out, and in a sense then they're helping their kids out, and obviously helping the teachers and the administrators at the school out a great deal. So I got to agree with you. I think a lot of times they get overlooked. I think a lot of those kids were successful because of Scotus, but because their parents sent them to Scotus and made sure that they did the right things while they were here at school.
You helped the Shamrocks to back-to-back boys state track and field championships. Can you break down those 2 years and what made those teams special? And obviously I know Mike Chilaha, huge part in that, but there was a lot of other people part of that too.
Well, there was, and those weren't the only two good teams we had.
For sure.
I mean, I can't remember exactly, but I mean, we won like 15 conference championships in a row, and I'm guessing at that. I think it even might be higher. Same with winning districts. We were unique. Again, this is probably help from the parents, but pretty much the football staff was also the track staff. And if you were going to go out for football, you went out for track. So where a lot of schools had teams of 30 kids, we might have 75, 9 through, and a lot of the seniors would go out. So those 2 state championships, we had a runner-up, I think, before that. The 2 state championships were Mike's in a sense that he was our horse, 100, 200, 400, 880 relay. But we had other kids. We had a triple jumper that won a state championship. I think Rick Schumacher did. And I was the throw coach, so I spent all my time over in the shot put and discus area. We had some outstanding athletes there, so it was a team effort led by a great athlete.
Yeah, I would love to see, and it's not existent, but just to see film of Mike running in high school. It just had to have been something pretty amazing to watch. How great was it to watch him, though?
He emerged. At that time we had a freshman track team and a varsity track team. So when he was a freshman, he didn't run on the varsity much till toward the end of the season when he started putting together these times. We put together a relay at the district that had, I think, a couple of freshmen on it, and they just about qualified. But then as a sophomore, he exploded. He came on and was in contention and won I don't know how many, but won the gold medals in the 100, 200, 400 for the next 3 years. He was the guy in the state.
Yeah. So word association. So I'll say a name, and I want you to use one word to describe that player.
Okay, I'll try.
Student, okay. So and we're just going to do the late 70s. Tim Hiroza.
Tough.
Dennis Reba.
Quick.
Tim Harrington.
Mental.
Mike Chilaha.
Fast.
Mean Man Tom Hoffman.
Gutty.
And Rick Schumacher.
Talented.
Okay. So now we'll kind of get to the next part here. Was there a time during the first 5 years or so at Scotus, 5-6 years, you're kind of here, you're kind of doing your thing. Was there ever a time where you thought, maybe I'd like to run my own football program or like to go somewhere else? Did that ever cross your mind, or did you ever think about that?
Well, I thought about it. I was offered a couple of jobs. I was asked to. No, I wasn't offered the job. I was asked to interview there at Aquinas. Aquinas wanted me to come in for an interview. Probably about 5 years later, Wahoo Newman called up and wanted me to come in for an interview before they hired Matt Turman. Matt was at, Turman was at David City High, and I was going to go there and interview, and then decided not to. After about 10 years here, I was offered an assistant job at the University of North Dakota as a defensive line coach. Coach Pat Burns was
Okay.
up there, and he offered me a job, and we went up there, drove up there, and I interviewed and was offered the job, and took it for about 3 days, and then Jim talked me out of it.
Wow. Wow.
But there were several opportunities that I had to leave, but I'll tell you what, we had such a tight coaching staff here and a tight teaching staff. I didn't want to leave. To this day, John Peterson and Vern Younger and those guys are my best friends. And that's how it was then. And that's how it still is.
That's great. To have that camaraderie too. It says a lot about this place, especially during that time. Were there some teachers, I guess, that you could name that, maybe they weren't coaches, but you worked hand in hand with, or they were really big mentors for you when you got here?
Oh, sure. I was at that time, junior high was up on the third floor, and like I said, I taught 4 junior high sections, and probably a person that had a great deal of influence on me was Mabel Picaric. She was a math teacher up there, and she was kind of the what should we call it? The leader up on the third floor. If
Kind of the glue.
if there was something wrong, she was not afraid to tell you that it was wrong, and if you were doing something right, she was not afraid to tell you that you were doing it right. So
Yeah.
and when I first came in the first several years, I'd have to say her and principal up on the third floor. We had a third floor junior high principal. It was Steve John, and then Bob Arp followed him, and they were outstanding people.
Yeah. So Mabel, I know, just a huge impact on a lot of people. And she just recently passed away.
Right.
John has said the same thing to me. He said that she was just instrumental in his teaching lessons and just classroom management, all those things. Like, she just was such a great teacher. And she's just a person at Scotus that I wish I would have been able to meet here, that I've just heard so many great stories about. And she just, is another person who you don't want to do a Mount Rushmore, so to speak, but she would be.
She would be on it.
She would be on it.
Absolutely.
For sure. As from a teaching standpoint, I mean, she just impacted so many people
Yes,
for so
she did.
long.
Yep.
So then we'll go to the 80s, and 1984 rolls around. Were you guys confident as coaches going into the preseason? Obviously, that year you guys finish as Class B state champs, 13-0. Kind of talk about the preseason.
Well, the year before we had a good football team in '83. In '81, we were about 500 or something like that. '82, we got better. '83, we really improved. We had a lot of people coming back in '84, and then, as you mentioned, we had a transfer. Keith Neal came in as a running back and fit right in with us. We had good football players, some outstanding linemen. Bob Kwapnowski, you could just go up and Steve Bunk, go up and down the line. These guys were all-staters. A future all-stater, Pat Engelbert, was kind of he was a sophomore that year, and it was kind of a backup that could play all kinds of positions. And things just worked out for us that year. We stayed away from major injuries. We had I guess a year that you kind of dream about.
Yeah, and looking at your scores, I mean, a lot of shutouts, a lot of,
Yep.
Maybe kind of 33-6 kind of scores
We
that.
had a great. Not only did we have Keith Neal, but we had a great fullback by the name of Jeff Pedraza. Quarterback was Todd Duran, was just a tremendous leader. He was a good football player, but probably his greatest thing was just his leadership ability, and we just everything hit on all cylinders.
Yeah. You guys have some tougher playoff games, and then you reach the state championship and you travel to Gothenburg. What was prep like for them?
No, Gothenburg came here.
Gothenburg came to Columbus.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
that's my fault.
Yeah.
So they came here. What was the prep like for that?
Well,
Because they had bumped Novacek.
Yeah, they had a great quarterback. Of course, we had a rhyme or a saying going in, so it was dump, bump, and it was he was probably one of the most outstanding players in the state, maybe one of the most well-known because he was a great basketball player and was a great track guy. And we played here on a Saturday night, had a huge crowd, and really had a outstanding game against them. I want to mention one thing that happened also here at home. We played Roncalli in like the second game of the second playoff game. When we came out on the field, they were on the visitors' side, and they had a great big sign there, "Beat the Discoverers." They didn't even know who the hell we were. So needless to say, we didn't have to say a word to the kids about that, So
Wow.
And that was also a home game, but that was a great thrill to win that state championship.
Absolutely. In Gothenburg, too, they've always had solid football success,
Sure.
and they've just been a really solid team. I think you guys won the game 10-6.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel to win that first one on the football field as a coach?
Well, very proud of our kids. Obviously, as a coach, that you have to have the players before you can contend, and then the players have to believe in what the coaches are trying to get through to them. And like I said, it just worked with that group of kids, and it was an outstanding football team. Of all the teams that I worked with, it would be a real good argument to say they might have been the best team. We had an outstanding group of players, and like I said, we didn't have many injuries. And things just went right.
And some of the all-staters on that team, Steve Bonk, Todd Jarecki, Carl Haroza, Keith Neal, you talk about how it all needs to come together from the players to the coaches to the players. How coachable were those guys?
Oh, really coachable. You mentioned Todd Jarecki. He was a kid that was a shot putter for me and outstanding lineman, just a really good kid. And like we had outstanding backups, and we were deep, and it was a good football team.
Pat Engelbert was a sophomore. Would you say he was the first, during your time, the first sophomore who really got to see playing time at that level?
Well, at that level, probably,
Because I know, because during your early years, freshmen didn't suit for varsity, correct?
No,
So,
not at all.
Yeah. And I know that kind of went through the 80s and maybe a little bit in the 90s, too, where coming in as a sophomore and playing on that good of a team.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like, sometimes, you play the younger guys if you've got a rough team or it's not going well, but to be that successful and for him to still crack the lineup, you had to see something really special in him.
Absolutely. We had a freshman team, my last year of coaching was 2001, and we never did dress freshmen. We always had a freshman team. Coach Younger was the freshman coach. And when Pat came in as a freshman on the track team, he had already started to establish himself as a shot putter and discus thrower, and you just kind of knew that it was there, the it
intangibles and
Yep.
the it factor. Around this time, volleyball's really taking off with John. They go to the state tournament. They would win one in 85. Cross country won their first district title, I think, in the fall of 85. And football, obviously, you guys are doing great. What was it like being in the halls during that time, during the day? It seemed like everybody probably on the same page as it comes to, I want to be competitive and we want to win every time we step on the field, step on the court, get on the track, whatever it is.
I think the the thing that sticks out to me is support. The vast majority of the football players would go to the volleyball games. They were the first of the rowdy dowdies, and just supporting each other, whether it's cross country, whether it was basketball, whether it was football or whatever. The coaches supported each other. I was a strength coach, and the boys and girls lifted at the same time before school and after school. By that time, we already had a couple of strength training classes during the school day. Everybody was expected to do the same thing. It wasn't that the cross-country kid that was expected to be in the weight room just like an offensive lineman in football. So I think all that went together to kind of bond the student body.
The 85 football team finished 10-1, so the year after the state championship. Mm-hmm. Obviously, go on I think it was like 24 games in a row, you win. You lost in the playoffs to Aurora. That team seemed pretty special and maybe destined for something more, maybe to go back-to-back. What happened towards the end of that year that you could remember? I mean, Aurora, great program, probably had a great game plan, but were there some injuries? Some of the all-conference players on that team were Steve Starzyk, Mark Love, Kurt Kuda, Jerry Zywick, Dave Younger, Pat Engelbert, and Carl Horoza. So kind of a who's who of some Hall of Famers in there.
Yeah, we had some great players.
Short.
Leader of that team by far was, I'd have to say, Bobby Kwapmanowski on the offensive defensive line, and then Carl Rosa, who was a state champion in triple jump in track and letter of intent with Nebraska. Aurora had, I think, a Penner was the quarterback who was, I think he ended up going to maybe Kearney or someplace, but was outstanding. It was just one of those things where we could have probably played them 5 times and they'd have won twice, we'd have won twice, and we'd have tied once.
Sure. They just got you on one night.
And it was at their place. It was a big disappointment. The thing was, those kids put in just as much effort and tried just as hard as the kids and actually these kids, the seniors of that year were juniors the year before, and they were some of the mainstays. Pat was just a junior that year, and he'd go on to have a great senior year. So.
It's nice to be able to have that continuity of those juniors to not be satisfied with winning a state title, and then the next year, hey, we want more. And they did their best to try to do that. Came up a little bit short, but they still had a really great team. So during at this point, you'd been at Scotus for 10 years, and I guess overall experience going well. Judy's there. You guys have 2 boys, and how is family life kind of in that time frame, would you say?
It was outstanding. In fact, part of the reason why I didn't take a couple of those jobs, or why I didn't go on to, college when I had a chance, was the fact that had family right here in town with Jim living here. My brother Bill and his family lived in Norfolk. His boys went to Norfolk Catholic, so we had a tremendous rivalry developing there. That would spill out into the 90s when his boys and my boys were about the same age. So it was just a heck of a good time to be around here. It really was. I can't remember getting a phone call as a coach. I got lots of them when I was the AD from maybe an irate parent on one thing or another. But as a coach, I can't ever remember somebody calling up and say, "Hey, Charlie needs to be playing. What are you doing?" That just never happened.
Yeah, and that's great because that's how it should be.
Yeah,
coach is coach and the parent's parent.
Yep.
Late 80s, guy by the name of Merlin Lom starts here. Do you remember? Were you on the hiring committee for that, or do you remember when Merlin came on? Or
I don't think I was on the hiring committee. Well, Merlin came from Wakefield. And a kid that I coached at Newcastle, Scott Miller, was on the staff at Wakefield. And that's kind of how I found out a little bit about Merlin. And then, of course, Scott would come here for a bunch of years and work. But I kind of learned about Merlin's background, especially in track, from Scott.
So you get him on board, and that had to been pretty exciting to add him to your track program.
And basketball.
Yeah, and I guess talk about him as a young coach.
Oh, he's just like everybody else. He was excited. He was a guy that knew what he was talking about. He was a person that if he said he was going to do it, he did it. I would say joined right in with the group. He didn't even know that he was a new guy.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we kind of get to the 90s now. 93, you guys would win another state championship. That's probably one of my favorite years of film to watch. I'm a film junkie. I love to go back and watch old films, and especially the Beatrice playoff game. Can you kind of break that down?
We had to go down there.
Yep.
I can remember we weren't real happy about how things were going in the first half, and then we were going into the school, and they had the dang school locked up. We couldn't get to our locker room, and there were probably some words said that I probably better not repeat here. But we came out the second half and played outstanding. It was one of the greatest games, in my Scotus career. Again, we had just an outstanding bunch of kids led by a fullback linebacker, Scott Sabota, running back, defensive back, Jeff Herdzina, outstanding lineman. Probably, I'm guessing there was a half a dozen All-Staters on that football team. I don't know for sure, but just an outstanding group of guys. Beatrice game, even though that wasn't the state championship game, that was the game.
Yeah, quarterfinal game, and you guys ended up, I think, 22-21.
Yeah, something like that.
And went into overtime, and
yep.
I think they went for 2 and didn't get it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the film of it. So I love watching it on YouTube because whoever was filming for you guys, they're definitely screaming, "Woo, we did it!" And it's great. The camera shakes a little bit,
yeah.
But that had been a big deal. You go play Beatrice, and then the next week you go to Gretna to play them.
Right.
Yeah, and I think you guys won that one like 13-10.
Yeah.
So it was a close one. And then you play Adams Central on the road.
On the road, yeah.
At Hastings College, and you guys you win that game pretty handily. I think it was close at halftime, but then I think there's a block punt and then a Scott Savota fumble return for a touchdown, something like that.
Obviously, Adams Central was a good football team. We thought that you kind of played by regions at that time, and the Western, the bracket they were in, we thought was a lot lighter than the bracket that we were in. Mm-hmm. To get to the state finals, So not that we didn't respect them, but we were pretty confident going into that game.
Talk about that game and what that meant to go 13-0 to win another one. Because it's, especially here, I feel like a lot of success, a lot of winning happens. But to win is hard.
Sure it is.
It's very, very hard.
Well,
I guess kind of talk about how, just how special it means to those kids to win that.
Well, just like we talked about losing at Aurora in '85, every year, you're trying to get into the playoffs. You're trying to figure out what route you'll end up taking into the playoffs. You always hate to look ahead, but you did. And the thing is, we always thought that, number one, our conference, the Centennial Conference, and then number two, our district that we were in, because we always played a conference schedule until they started putting us into districts. Mm-hmm. And in our district, we always had somebody like a Schuyler or an Aquinas or North Catholic or whatever, who was maybe a top 5 or at least a top 10
Wahoo
type team. Yeah, Wahoo Newman. Mm-hmm. So it was always a great challenge.
In 95, you take over as athletic director. Was that just kind of the next step for you? You felt like that you wanted to take that on, or kind of talk about how that kind of came into play?
Well, I can remember Spenceri he quit, and then Rick Grubaugh became the athletic director, and then Rick was leaving education. He was going to go into business. I was interested in becoming the athletic director. When I interviewed, I told him I didn't want to give up coaching, but in the end, I needed to give up track because in the spring at that time already we had soccer, and you can't really be a track coach and be the athletic director because there's soccer games, a couple times a week and so on. So I gave up. They let me keep football, and I gave up track. One of the reasons why I took the job was because we always teased Rick that he wasn't the athletic director and Ned Hash was the athletic director. and I visited with Annette, and she agreed to stay on as the activities director assistant. That's kind of how it happened. The biggest change for me, I guess, was, and I didn't like to do this, but it happens where you have to discipline kids and
Sure.
and things like that. So, but it worked out. Obviously, I must have liked it because I stayed for 21 years as the AD.
Yeah, 21 years, 34 state championships. It's pretty good, pretty fun.
I always told the coaches, all I do is schedule the bus. You guys are the coaches, but I think we do have had a heck of a run there, and just outstanding people to work with.
Absolutely. You would stay on, you'd be AD, and then you'd help with football. I feel like one of the teams that, just doing research and history, just the 5 years that I've been here, from a football standpoint, that doesn't get maybe enough love or credit is the 97 football team. 97 football team, they start 2-2. I think they lost to St. Cecilia and Aquinas, and then go on a tear and finish the regular season 6-2, go to the playoffs, beat North Catholic by a touchdown, and then lose to Aquinas on a last-second field goal.
And Aquinas won the state championship.
And Aquinas rolled through the semis, and then they beat Imperial, I think, by 2 touchdowns in Lincoln. You guys beat Pius, who won Class B in the regular season.
Yep.
I guess kind of talk about a little bit of that year and to beat Pius, Tim Aylward, it's Pius. That's a huge deal. And they were obviously very good because they won the Class B state championship.
Yeah.
I was talking to Vern about that Aquinas game, and they lined up to kick a field goal, and you guys were pretty confident because they never kicked field goals. I guess kind of talk about that year.
Yeah, well, they beat us here.
Yeah.
Like 31-29 or something like that, and Aquinas did. But that was a great year. Like I said, there were of all the football teams that I worked with, probably 1/4 of them were probably, if the ball would have bounced right, you could have got to the state championship game, or if the scheduling was a little bit better.
Yeah.
Things like that. That's just how it goes. That's why you have to look at Ron Mimick and Jeff Beller and those guys that can win 3 out of 7, 3 championships in 7-8 years. That is great in football. It really is, because you don't control your schedule. The state makes your schedule for you. There's some areas of the state where there's just better football played than in other areas. And that's where you can pick up a loss or two and really have a good team and not get into the playoffs. Or if you get in the playoffs, you're a lower seed and have to play the really good teams to start with. So that's where you really gotta admire guys like that. We always thought that we were competitive. We always thought that before the state started making schedules up, and I was on the original committee that helped make up the first schedules that the state put together. But anyway, before that, we had a heck of a time getting enough games. There were several years where we played only 8 games and we could play 9 because we couldn't get a full schedule. And we played teams like Waverly, and we played Beatrice regular season a couple of times. We went all the way out to North Platte St. Pat's because we couldn't get a game. Had to go all over. Heck, that's why we ended up playing Pius, and Pius had to play us.
Yeah.
Because nobody wanted to play them.
Sure.
So it was difficult. That once we got into the state putting the schedules together, and I think that was probably the late '80s, early '90s when the state started putting the schedules together. That changed a little bit, but with like I said, it takes obviously some talent. It takes good coaches, and it takes a lot of luck.
Yeah,
and that's where you have to look at like what John Peterson did in volleyball. Volleyball is the same thing in Nebraska. In high school, volleyball's just as important as high school football.
Absolutely. Especially
in Nebraska, and that's putting together teams like that is outstanding.
Yeah, it's just wild to me to think, before the state took over scheduling, that it was you're driving to play St. Pat's in a football game on a Friday night. I mean, I understand out in the West, you get west of Ogallala in the Panhandle, that's just a regular thing. But for that to happen, when you're driving through, and not to just, but I'm just going to name like Central City, St. Paul.
Oh, absolutely.
We could stop there and play tonight. We could stop there and play tonight. Even Kearney Catholic. You know what I mean? Like there just would have been a lot of other teams that are a lot closer.
That's why the conference was so important in those days, because you'd have conference football championships. Yeah. In fact, we used to play a conference championship at the end of the year if you weren't in the playoffs, and before the playoffs, so. It was it was difficult for good teams to get a good schedule.
So talking about the Centennial Conference, if you had to describe it in one word, what would it be?
Competitive.
Yeah, and just what are some of the? I mean, you can name some of the people you coached against, but I mean, it just made you probably a better coach too to go against those great teams and everything like that.
Absolutely, in our division, when we broke into 2 divisions, we had Hastings, Grand Island, Aquinas, and us, Wahoo, Newman, and then there was the East Division. It'd be like Bergen, Council Bluffs, St. Albert's was in our conference at one time. The Omaha schools, Boys Town.
Yeah,
so that pretty good conference.
And just because I know him and you mentioned St. Pat's, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about Kevin Dotson.
Oh, outstanding young man.
Yeah.
He came here and fit in right away, got on our football coaching staff, and just an outstanding young guy. And he's had a great success coaching, and I think he's also he's the boss out there now, if I'm not mistaken.
He is, yep.
He's the president or whatever they call
Yep, he's the superintendent.
Head of their school. He can get away with a lot of stuff now since he's the superintendent. But no, great guy.
Every time I see him, he always talks highly about this place and how it was, it was even though he was going home to St. Pat's, it was very hard to leave.
When Jim retired in 2001, I called him when he was at St. Pat's, and I says, I know I probably can't talk you into coming back, but just come on back. And I just want to show you around. So him and his wife came back here for a weekend. I talked like hell, and I thought at one time I kind of had him convinced that he might come back here and be the football coach. But his family was out there, so you can't blame him.
No, not at all. again, great guy. So you coached football with Jim. Did you both retire the same year, 2001? Yeah. Okay. Was it hard to be done?
Well, in a sense, it was just because of that. I would have probably maybe, because I was the athletic director, maybe quit football a little earlier than what I did. But my youngest son graduated in 2001, so I wanted to stay on and coach while he was still playing. But it was definitely a tough decision. It seemed to be the thing to do, though, at the time.
For sure. And being able to coach your boys, that had to mean a lot.
Sure, that was fun.
Yeah. I guess you and Jim both go being the AD, and, Jim with his status as being such a successful head coach. Was it difficult to find that guy to follow Jim?
Well, obviously it was. And we brought in a guy from the outside, and they went about 2-8 or something the next year.
Yeah.
3-7 or something like that. I forget what it was. So we struggled for a couple of years, and then changed coaches, and that's when Roger Cranky, we hired him, and he got us back on the right track. And then, of course, Tyler Linder came in, and he's got a state championship, and we've been very competitive ever since.
Coach Cranky still helps out with the team, and Coach Linder, they do a really good job of building young men. And
yes, they do.
How special was it for you to see them win, to beat Norfolk Catholic in 2015?
Oh, that was great. That was my last year, especially Norfolk Catholic. The last bunch of years, Norfolk Catholic was maybe in more than just football. Very, very competitive.
Oh yeah.
Volleyball, basketball, soccer, all kinds of things.
You could make an argument that they had a comparable run that Scotus had in the 90s and the 2000s. I mean, not as many consistent state championships, but just a variety in football, in speech, in volleyball, like all those things.
Yeah, they were great. Jeff Beller, and a very good friend of mine, and it was just a lot of fun competing against those guys. In 2015, I'll never forget, kind of down on the track in front of our student body, and when the game was over, went out on the field, and the first guy I talked to was Bell, so it was, congratulatory. And I think to this day, I think Norfolk Catholic and Scotus get along very well together.
Yeah. Coach Beller, he's just one of those guys that, I don't know if you'll ever see another one like that.
Yep.
Pretty good, and just very humble.
Yeah.
He's just a few times I've met him, just a very humble guy. And
yeah, he's from Walled Hill.
Yep.
And when I was at Newcastle, I coached
they had some good basketball teams.
I coached against teams that him and his brother, who was the NSAA director for years, coached against teams that those guys played on. So
yeah. So as we get kind of towards the end here, you wrap up your AD duties and hand it off to Merlin after 41 years. Was it easy to let it go?
I'm going to say it was easy in the sense that being the AD was a 6-day, 6-night job anymore.
Yeah.
With all the things that go on, and the expectations, and having to go to everything from a 7th grade B basketball game to a play to the state track meet. You're expected to be at all those places, and it takes it from you. It really does. If I guarantee you, I wouldn't have lasted 21 years without Annette. She was just great as far as organization and handling things. She took a lot of phone calls and handled them that probably other people would have said, no, you need to talk to Gary about that. I was a little bit apprehensive about what I would do, not in all my spare time, and yet I was kind of glad to hang it up.
Annette Hash is another name too, like Mabel. You got your Mount Rushmore.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, she put in a lot of time here, and she still does. I mean, she was just here on Friday helping in the development office.
Yeah.
She just is
she
tremendous.
sat over there behind that desk for 20 years, 21 years, and like I said, I don't know if number one, I don't know if I'd have taken the job if she wasn't here, and number two, it made it a whole lot easier to last that long because she was here.
Yeah. So what have you kind of done in your spare time since retirement?
Me and Jim, after we retired, and before that, started in the mid-'80s, we had Puetz Brothers Lawn Service. So we did that for a couple of years, 3 years, and kind of was cutting back on that. But at one time, when we had a lot of kids from school here working, our own kids working, we were mowing 100 yards a week.
Wow.
So I was doing that for a while. I have a big garden. I like to garden. The last few years, I've become a Law and Order fan. I can watch Law and Order on TV about any channel, any day. You can find Law and Order on some channel. And following Scotus, and I love watching during the summertime. I'm a baseball fan. I get Major League extra innings, so I watch a baseball game every day almost. And my wife still works part-time. She will never quit. I do most of the cooking, and that's why I'm overweight.
You look good. No way. And how are Nick and Joe?
They're outstanding. Nick, 4 or 5 years ago, moved to St. Louis. I always, whenever people ask me what they do, Nick is a hacker and Joe is a thief. Nick works for a company that goes out and is hired to try to hack into their security systems. He goes and bids on the jobs. He's got about 25 guys that work for him. They go from St. Louis to Chicago to Minneapolis, Des Moines, Omaha, Kansas City, that route. So he's around here once in a while. Got one little boy. Keegan is going to be, I think, 9 years old. Joe is a thief. He's a financial planner in Omaha. He's got his own company, calls it Puetz Financial, and he's got some people working for him. And he's got 2 kids, a little girl, Bryn, about 9 years old, and then a little boy, about 5 years old, Briggs. So Nick's wife, Julie, she graduated in the middle, about the same time Nick did. She was the first Nebraska native to be offered a soccer scholarship to the University of Nebraska.
Wow.
She went to Marion High School. She blew her knee out and ended up at College of St. Mary's, where she played with her and Christy Brzezinski. Christy Korth were on the same team together. And then Joe's wife went to Scott, and she's a doctor in Omaha at Lakeside Hospital. So they're both doing very well.
Well, that's great that they're doing so well. If we get ready to wrap it up here, let's do one more round of word association. Okay. Merlin Lom.
Organized.
John Peterson.
Winner.
Tyler Linder.
Dedicated.
Mabel Pekarik.
Leader.
Annette Hash.
Great.
Jim Pitts.
Idle.
So, last question. If you had to describe Scotus in one word, what would it be and why?
One word, I'd have to say outstanding, because I think you get an outstanding Christian education coming out of here.
Well, I think that's a great way to end this episode. Thank you, Gary, for taking the time and sharing your stories with Shamrock Nation and all Aquinas Catholic school family and supporters. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Of course. If you're interested in hearing more Shamrock Green Room episodes, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Make sure to follow us on our social media channels, Scotus Central Catholic on Facebook, X, and YouTube, and Columbus Catholic Schools on Instagram. Thank you again for joining us in the Shamrock Green Room.